Hello and welcome to Creative Writing Under the Apple Tree. I'm Roy Peachey and I'm the author of Between Darkness and Light, a novel for adults, and The Race, a children's novel which is going to be published early next year. And in this little series of creative writing talks, I'm going to give you some ideas about how to deal with the blank page and how to move beyond that into writing in all sorts of different ways. So hopefully there'll be things here for children and for adults, for beginners and for more advanced writers. But I want to start with that real problem for any writer, the blank page. What do we do when we just don't have any ideas to get us started? Well, we need to unclog. We need to find ways of tapping into what's already there potentially within us. And a great way of doing that is simply to stop and listen. So rarely do we stop, so rarely do we really listen. We hear, but we don't listen. So an exercise I often do with my students is called a 2-minute silence. Though to be perfectly honest, it works better if you can give longer to it than that. 5-minute silence might be wonderful. And the idea is very simple. Simply stop everything you're doing, have a pen and paper to hand, and then just listen. Really listen to whatever it is you can hear, whether it's inside, whether it's outside, whether it's your heart beating, whether it's the pen on the paper, whether it's children in the garden next door. And jot down everything you can. Don't worry about complete sentences, don't worry about making it beautiful, but try and be accurate, try and be truthful. What is it you really hear, not what particular phrase does this remind you of, what cliche have you come across before. And then once you've had your 2 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever it is, then we can go back and revisit it. So in a second I'll start writing, I'll start the clock, and then I'm going to pause. It's probably not great TV for you to be watching me writing. And then we'll have a look at what I've come up with and see how we might shape it a little bit, and then it's over to you. Okay, so 2 minutes begins now. So here's what I came up with. At first, as you can see, it wasn't very impressive. Birds trilling, real cliche. But I was just getting into the right zone. And then as I really started to listen, especially listening to this bird, thought, okay, what does the bird sound like? It's a bird searching for the right note. And that's a much more authentic phrase, I think. And then, as so often happens in these situations when you're videoing, there's a child's call, insistent, undeniable. Again, that was me trying to search for the right words to name, to pin down this call. And then there's, as we're in lockdown at the moment, there was this improbable plane staking its claim on the skies. These beautiful, clear, blue, silent, almost silent skies at the moment, and there's this plane flying improbably across it. I quite like the mixture of the words improbable and plain. I think Auden, W.H. Auden, said that the writer doesn't look for new words, he just looks for new combinations of words. And then it's back to the birds. The birds really were insistent. So I suppose it was being in the garden and thinking about the garden hedge, and therefore thinking about these birds going back and forth across the hedge. So they were neighbourly birds, chuntering back and forth across the hedge. And ignore that red underlining, don't believe a word says. Chuntering is completely fine. In fact, thinking about the verbs is often more important than thinking about the adjectives. We can overfill our writing with adjectives, whereas really nailing the verbs makes a big difference. And then there was this electric saw, and it was persistent in its what? I don't know, in its attack, in its buzzing, but buzzing didn't quite seem the right word. Persistent in its something. And that's okay. There's a phrase, it's broken off. We can work on that later. And then as the time came to a close, there was this magpie which landed on the top of a tree, and it was making this very clear, very distinctive noise, clucking isn't the right word. Clucking has got to go. But for the moment, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to replace that one with. But that's again okay. You need to be able to self-edit. So there we are, we've got a number of phrases, we've got something to work with. Now what do we do with it next? Well, that's really up to you. Sometimes when I'm working with students, I'll get them to take these phrases and to work them into a poem. It has the advantage of being brief, being self-contained, but we might want to just use this as a way of starting our own novel or starting our own creative writing prose piece. A phrase or a sentence can just unravel what's been clogged up inside, to mix my metaphors horribly. So this is a getting started exercise. Nothing here is complete. I might not use any of these phrases again. I might use just an occasional word. I might use half of one sentence and attach it to half of the other. But what we don't have anymore is the blank page. We've started. We're off. Okay, great. So I hope that was helpful, and I hope you'll join me again for some creative writing ideas under the apple tree. And why the apple tree? I should perhaps just mention that. Well, we just had some glorious blossom on this tree, and after a long winter, but it'll be a long time yet before we get the real fruit coming. And creative writing feels a bit like that. There are times when it just feels like there's nothing there, it's just bare branches. And then you start to get some wonderful ideas, some wonderful thoughts, that's the blossom. But those ideas they've got to develop, they've got to grow. And it's a long time before you get the full fruits of your labour. So we're going to look at every aspect of the writing process, from the very beginnings, like we've done today, through to more developed ideas, right through to endings and redraftings. Okay, we'll see how we go. We may not be able to stick out here all the time. It's a bit bright, I wonder, for example, now, but it might get a bit wet, it being Britain. But thank you very much for joining me, and hope to see you again soon. Bye.